Very good. We'll start in a second. I'll start on time, just to be fair.
That's how I picked out Florence the first time in a big group.
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah.
There we
I'm watching the seconds, Rabbi. You have only one.
go. All right. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Man.
Let's go straight on. So Joseph has been summoned by Jacob, and let me make sure and see. Right, he called Joseph, and he asked him to swear to him that he wouldn't bury him in Egypt, and he said he would. And this is where, so we're on to the next verse. Lamed Aleph, Vayomer Ishavali. He said, swear to me. Vayishavalo, and he swore to him. Vayishtachu Yisrael al Rosh Hamitah. And Jacob prostrated himself. He bowed on the head of the bed, on the head of the bed. So it sounds, there is a question as to who Jacob was bowing to, but Rashi is going to tell us that he actually was bowing to Joseph. And here's the Rashi. Vayishtachu Yisrael. Israel bowed down. Tala be'idnei sagid le. That is a proverb in Aramaic. You can hear the rhyming in it. Tala be'idnei sagid le, which means the fox in his time bowed down to him. And the fox isn't the lion. And the point is that when the fox is successful, when things are going his way clearly, then you need to bow to him. So that would be Joseph, of course. So there is actually a Mishnah Brura on this with the source of this particular statement. But let's take a look at the Rashi first. Al Rosh Hamitah, literally on the head of the bed, Hafach Atzmo Letzad Hashchina. So it's interesting that Rashi kind of incorporates both interpretations, because there's another interpretation that says that Jacob was bowing to the Shekhinah. At any rate, he turned himself to the side of the Shekhinah, Mikan Amru, and from this we derive, Shehashkina Lamala Meirashotav Shel Choleh, that the divine presence is above the head of the sick person. And he tells you, this is from the Talmud, two places, in the Talmud, Shabbat and Nidari. Davar Acher, Al Rosh Hamitah, that this actually refers to Joseph. Al Shahaita Mitato Shlema. So Rosh Hamitah could mean the one who was head of his bed, meaning in control of his bed. That is to say that this is a euphemism, that this is actually a euphemism because referring to Joseph, Al Shahaita Mitato Shlema, because literally it means his bed was perfect, meaning that he didn't have seminal emissions very often. It refers to that, but it means that he wasn't trying to excite himself in that particular way. And not only that, but remember, he refused, and this is probably more a direct reference to the fact that he refused the seduction of Potiphar's wife. That was a very great thing. Yes, question?
Chabad translates this completely differently.
All right, well, let me finish this, and
Okay.
then we'll keep going. V'lo haya ba rasha, and he was, it literally it would mean, and there was no wicked person in it. Shehare Yosef Melechu, And because okay, so here's the idea that despite I believe he's going to go in this way, that despite the fact that Joseph was a king, the od shenishba levein hagoyim, and despite the fact that he was captured amongst non-Jews, v'harei omed bitzdako, nevertheless he retained his righteousness. So there was a sense and a belief that pagans were immoral, that they were very lax in their sexual behavior. And the fact that, there's this recognition that when you are a king, right, when you're in that kind of power, very often you're tempted to think of yourself as being the arbiter of what's right and what's wrong, and you take advantage of that. And yet Joseph didn't do that. And of course, the fact that he was in a different culture now, and yet he withstood that particular environment and those influences. Go ahead with the Chabad, Lauren.
Now, it's possible that in some way it's saying what you said, but just saying it so differently that it's hard for me to be sure. But when it says Al Rosh Pina and Devar Acher, it says then first in parenthesis or brackets, he prostrated himself to God. Then out of the brackets, it says, because his offspring were perfect, insofar as not one of them was wicked, as evidenced by the fact that Joseph was king and that he was captured among the heathens and he remained steadfast in his righteousness.
I can absolutely understand that, because generally when it has this phrase mitato shlema, that it refers to Jacob, because Jacob is known for the fact that mitato shlema, that he was very careful about maintaining and not masturbating and things like that. And that is referred, generally that expression is used in reference to Jacob. So that absolutely, I'm not here to argue without, now this, there are commentaries on Rashi that we already mentioned, Tosafot Yishanim, and also I did not look at Siftei Chachamim, but
Well,
yeah,
this saying
okay,
if his offspring were
no,
perfect,
no,
that
right,
doesn't seem to make sense because I don't think that all of them were.
yes, but it does make sense if you're going to say that Rosh Hamitah, he did say this, he already mentioned this, and the reason why I went in my direction is because very often a davar acher is going to sort of go back and go, my sense is that it's going to take a different approach to things. So I'm, obviously what Chabad is saying, first of all, these people are really very thorough scholars and, beyond my wheelhouse. But I'll leave it. Maybe what I'll just do is I'll just erase this. But yeah, I can
Well,
see that.
you don't really, just because I think your way seems to make sense. I don't think all his offspring are perfect. And I think at the end, anyway, it's implying that, it's Joseph that was the perfect one,
Right.
and in the end, it certainly supports your
Right.
theory.
So it's ambiguous. It is ambiguous. I'll
Yeah.
leave it in.
But does the word mita sometimes refer to offspring? Is it?
No, okay, so I'm saying no quickly, but the truth is I've never heard it do that, Shira Beth. I haven't, really it refers to your behavior in bed. It means couch or something like that. That's what I've always understood it. I've never known it as a metaphor, right, for offspring. I can't think of an example.
But maybe it's a metaphor for the good behavior in bed, and it's referring to the offspring and not just to Joseph, is the kind of the
Right.
discrepancy.
Yes.
But
Right.
it doesn't, to me, make sense that all of them were righteous in that way.
Mhm. Right. I will tell you that this phrase mitato shlema, I only know of that as a reference to Jacob himself. I don't ever remember seeing that, used as a reference to Joseph. But we know that Joseph did, so I'll leave it as an ambiguity for the time being. I don't know that that Torah Tamima clarifies that, but he does say it could be both. And there are other Torah Tamima does make reference. Well, again, we could, if we would. Well, the Megillah thing is on on the Fox in his time comment, but Torah Tamima down here, he says, here we go. Aval betanchuma upasikta zutrata, these two midrashim, ita shnei perushim lemi hishtachaveh. There are two explanations as to whom he bowed down, to whom Jacob bowed down to. Im l'shchina or Yosef. So it's possible that if we were to go back into these particular midrashim, there'd be a clarification as to this davar acher. So he gives. So he says, interestingly enough, he says, and look and see Masha Katuv La'el, what is written above Rosh Perek Vayeshev, right at the beginning of Vayeshev, but pasuk regarding the verse that says, V'hinei Hashemesh v'hayareach. Remember the dream where Joseph says the sun and the moon were bowing to him? Ra'ayah, that this is a proof, Lamanda Amar, it certainly is a support to the one who holds Shahashtachaveh Yosef, that he bowed to Joseph. But that doesn't necessarily clarify the language that I was working with. I'm wondering, I could quickly look and see what Safaria says, but I think I'm going to keep going. And I'll check what Safaria says later on, God willing. Next verse, next chapter. Vayhi acharei hadvarim ha'ela. It was after these particular things. Vayomer Yosef, and he said to Joseph, and this is one of those examples in the Bible where it doesn't say who said to Joseph, but it does mean he said to Joseph, and it doesn't say who the he is. Hine avicha choleh. So that will give rise to a lovely Rashi comment. Hine avicha choleh. Behold, your father is ill. Vayikach et shnei vanav imo, and he took his two sons with him, et Menashe ve'et Ephraim, et Menashe and Ephraim. So there's a bunch of little things here going on that are quite nice. Vayomer leYosef. So he says, Echad mina magidim. He says, one of the people who, I guess magidim, one of the people who, servants maybe. A magid has more to do with somebody who is telling you stuff, right? From Haggadah. And he says, it's an abbreviated sentence. It's leaving out something. V'yeshomrim, there are those who say, Ephraim haya ragil lifnei Yaakov, that Ephraim was with Jacob quite a bit. He used to spend time with Jacob. But Talmuds, when he was studying, he studied with him. Ukeshechala Yaakov be'eretz Goshen, and when Jacob became ill in the land of Goshen, halach Ephraim etzel aviv, Ephraim went to see his father, the Mitzrayim in Egypt, lahagidlo, to tell him. So a sweet little interpretation. Vayikach et shnei vanav imo, he took his two sons with him, kedei sheyevarchem Yaakov lifnei moto, so that Jacob would bless them before he died. So here we go. This is actually a Torah Tamima that I remember that I think you might find interesting. So, not that any Torah Tamima I do with you, I don't think you'll find interesting, but I think you might find this especially interesting. Hine avicha choleh. He says, behold, your father is ill. Tanya. So there's a Baraita, there's an early of Mishnaic origins, a source. Ad Yaakov lo hayu chusha. Up until Jacob, there was not weakness. He's going to explain that. Ata Yaakov, Jacob came, Uva'e Rachame, and he begged for mercy, or he asked, he supplicated. Veheve Chusha, and there was or that there be a weakness. Shne'emar, as it states, Vayomer leYosef, they told Joseph, Hine avicha choler, behold, your father is ill. And this is in Baba Metzia. Let's take a look here. Make sure I got the correct place. Okay, this is Aleph. Lo nitpa'er me'ein mochach ze hapasuk ze. So it isn't clear where this passage is leaning, right? What's it proving? The Efshar Lomar, and it's possible to say, al pi hanahug, on the basis of a custom, b'midot anashim ba'alei midot, okay, with regards to the qualities of people who have character, lehizaher levasar beshura ra'am meforash. Wow. To give warning, that's lehizaher, right? Basar beshura. I probably needed to look at this ahead of time, my true confessions. It's what it sounds.
Levaser besora.
Yes. Right. Okay. Very good. Okay. To explicitly, Meforash, right? To predict a something that's going to be. Thank you, Shira Beth. A bad something that's going to happen in the future.
Well, isn't it just to give bad news? Levaser besora ra'a.
Yes.
You have to be careful when you're giving bad news about important people.
Yes, that's true. No, I really like what you're doing. Thank you. You're helping me a lot. Thank you. This is Chavruta, right?
Right.
Okay. Yes. Right. That's true. Right. Okay. To be careful when they give bad news explicitly, by giving bad news explicitly. And when you need to deliver bad news, modi'im beremes, perfectly supporting what you were saying, Shira Beth, to make known by an allusion, to hint at it, behipuch, so that means maybe to say the opposite, right? Euphemism, ha'inyan me'anashim acherim. So they turn around the matter from other. I think what it means is referring to other people. Okay. I think what he's talking about is euphemism. And I don't know if this is exactly the case, but I do know that in the Bible, an example of biblical euphemism is, so for example, when Pharaoh says that the Israelites are going to multiply and join their enemies and leave the land. In other words, but what he really means is that they'll join their enemies, the enemies of the Egyptians, and drive the Egyptians out of the land. But he doesn't want to say that. He doesn't. This would be an example of what he's talking about here. That the person should understand, okay, that it's the opposite situation. Right. So sometimes they refer. If I'm not mistaken, they sometimes refer to a person's bad behavior. I can't think of the specific example as sort of good behavior, but that they really mean is bad behavior. Ukamor beresh pesachim, and as an example is at the beginning of the Tractate Psachim Daled Aleph on page 4a. Sha'al Rabbi Chia l'Rav. Rabbi Chia asked Rav, Im Aviv Kayam. He asked him if his father was living. Heshiv lo she'imo kayemet. So Rav said to him, my mother is living. You understand
Mhm.
what he's saying to him, what he's doing here? Vehevin Rabbi Chia, and Rabbi Chia understood she'aviv met, that his father, that Rav's father. I'm wondering, wait a second. So his father, of course, could refer to Rabbi Chia's father. That would make more sense because Rav is giving Rabbi Chia bad news. Okay. Vehine kan haya hamagid hazeh, and in this case, right, the person who was the magid, the one who shared this news, Ephraim ben Yosef, was Ephraim, son of Joseph, and he's saying, check out the Rashi, shahaya bal nimus v'derech eretz, because he was a respectful person and he had good manners. The imkain lo havalei levaser leYosef. And if this was the case, it wasn't for him to tell Joseph, Meforash, explicitly, she'aviv choleh, that his father was sick, ela be'inyan nirmaz, except in the way that was a hint, an allusion. Kamo she'im hayam agid lo she'achiv beri'im. So, for example, if he said to him that his brothers were healthy, and it would have been, he would have understood that his father was sick. Ach, mikevan she'ad Yaakov. All right. So I think what he's saying is that it's surprising, right, that he said this to him, but because because until Jacob arrived, there was lo havechu shaklav. People didn't get weak. In other words, people didn't get sick. They didn't come weakened. Lo haya Yosef mevin mibsora kozo. Joseph would not have understood from the fact if Ephraim had come to Joseph and told him, by the way, your brothers are well, and Joseph would not have understood this. Shehu choleh. He wouldn't have understood that Jacob was ill. Elahaya choshev, but he would have thought ki aviv met. He would have thought that his father had died, because what happened is that people simply died. That's it. And by the way, let me just finish this up. Acharei she'ad az, because until that point, hayta hefech habriut hamita. Until that point, the opposite of health was simply death. V'lachen haya mukhrach lomar meforash shehu choleh. And for this reason, he had to tell him explicitly that he was sick. Umimele mevuar she'ad Yaakov lo havechu shaklal. And so from this, it is clear that until Jacob, there wasn't any illness. There wasn't any illness. Vedok, and this is to be understood. Here we go. Let me stop here. I will review this. This is what I thought he was going to say, and maybe he says this later on, that the origin of saying bless you, right? The origin of saying bless you when someone sneezes is because up till this point, when people didn't get sick, they died with a sneeze. Basically, the sneeze represented their last breath. And for this reason, they would say, bless you. And that's the origin of that particular custom. So there's actually a tradition that when you're studying Torah, you will not die as long as you're studying Torah. The angel of death has no power over you as long as you're in the middle of Torah study. And so that when you're studying Torah, or if you're in services, when you're praying, and someone sneezes, you don't say bless you. There's actually that custom of not saying bless you when somebody sneezes in the middle of Torah study or actually pray. I just thought you'd find that interesting. So this was somewhat of a convoluted argument. Are you comfortable with it, or do I need to explain anything?
Well,
You
the
think-
only thing I didn't understand was it seemed that Jacob was asking for weakness to happen.
That is what it sounded like. Yes, because, okay, I think what was this is that it doesn't say that he was asking for weakness. In reviewing this Hebrew here, it seems to me that he's simply saying that because Jacob asked for mercy, that's why illness was given, that you didn't just die suddenly.
You mean Jacob wasn't sick, but he asked for mercy and then got sick?
That's what it's sounding like. I would say that's the way I would interpret it.
He didn't want to die immediately. He
Correct.
wanted more time.
Right. Up to that point, it doesn't mention, up to this point, it doesn't say anything about chole in the Bible, in the Torah. This is the first time it mentions that someone got sick and uses that term. I mean, the eyes may have been weakened, but that wasn't considered illness as such. But people would die suddenly. They would just live, and then that was it. It was over. So I think, again, I need to go further on to see what Torah Tamima says about this, but it is possible that at a time of illness, it allows you to prepare yourself. It allows you to look into yourself. It's an opportunity for tshuva, etc., etc.
Well, did he want to die because he thought he wasn't going to see Joseph?
That's a very good question. No, I don't think he wanted to die. I don't think he wanted to die. Remember,
So when he was asking for mercy, he wasn't wanting it to be doled out in that way.
correct. That's the way I'm understanding this. Yes, correct. That he was seeking. Va'i means to ask for, right?
We needed time to bless all of his children,
Well,
right?
he did. But in general, he may have been asking. Remember, he tells Pharaoh he hasn't lived nearly as long as his father.
And he tells Pharaoh that he's had a bad life.
He does. He does. Right. I mean, yeah. This clearly there's a lot more to this that I need to, understand. But it is sort of interesting that they comment on the fact that this is the first time they mention illness. So this
And
is more.
my
Yeah.
first thought was that there was no chulsha, no illness in the family, but you understand it to mean in all of humankind.
Yes, that's the way I understand it. Correct.
Uh-huh.
Correct. And that's again the reason for this. And what's so interesting about saying bless you is that it's such a universal, seems to me to be a relatively universal practice, that it crosses cultures. Now, maybe it doesn't as much as I'm assuming, but certainly it's within English culture. Of course, I don't know if it's part of Spanish culture, or I'm not sure.
Yes.
I think I was just, are you, Jocelyn?
It
It is
Well,
part of Spanish.
Yes.
no, to your health is what they, no,
Entonces,
Sante,
salud. Oh,
a vos Sante.
Same idea,
Same
right?
thing.
Same idea.
Same thing. No, bless you is the same thing as saying, good health. It's the same idea.
salud.
Just so interesting. By the way, for those of you from, let's see, this would be Lauren because Golda's not here. Do you remember Saul Silvermans?
Of course.
Okay, Saul Silvermans was my physician while I was in St. Louis, and he said he had this joke he loved, which was you should live to 120 and a day, and he'd say the reason why you should live to 120 and a day is so that you shouldn't die suddenly.
Very nice.
So with that, I am going to end this morning, and I clearly have some homework to do. So thank you. And Shira Beth, thank you. That was a good save there. Thank you very much. You take
Well,
care.
some of
Everyone.
these things are part of, they're part of